In this lesson, we'll take a quick look at the origins of HTML5 so you can understand where it's come from. Then we'll talk about some of the tools you need to write HTML5 and to test it. And we'll discuss some of the features that HTML5 provides. So HTML has been around for many years, but it was in 2004 that the WhatWG group drafted the first specification of HTML5. WhatWG is the Web Hypertext Application Working Group, and they work closely with the World Wide Web Consortium to push forward the development of the HTML5 specification. So WhatWG is comprised of the leading browser vendors that we have today. Apple, for example, with their Safari browser, Mozilla with Firefox, and Google Chrome and Opera. These are leading organizations that are pushing forward the envelope, if you like, for HTML5. A lot of the features that we see in HTML5 are directly to support the needs of Web 2.0 and social websites, where we have the need for audio and video and cool graphics and communication between different applications. So a few key websites that you might want to have a look at. The formal HTML5 specification is here. This is the World Wide Web Organization's website. It's definitive and detailed, but like most specifications, it can be quite hard to read for the uninitiated. Perhaps another website you might find more useful is one that summarizes the differences between HTML5 and version 4. So if you're fairly comfortable with HTML already, then you might prefer this website to get an inkling of what's new in HTML5. So let's discuss some of the new features that we have with HTML5. First of all, we have semantic tags. Semantic tags allow you to define structure for your HTML document. So rather than using a div to represent the header and the footer and the menu bar, you can use semantic tags such as header, footer, section, and nav to define more clearly the intent of those elements. HTML5 also provides a new selector API, which makes it easy for you to find elements in your document rather than using old style functions such as getElementById. You can now use the query selector function or the query selector all function to find elements based on CSS syntax. So you can say, give me all the input controls which are selected, or give me the element that currently has keyboard focus. Very powerful. HTML5 also provides new types of form input controls such as date picker, time picker, URL, and email with built-in validation. Support from browsers is a little bit variable at the moment, but better is going to get. HTML5 also has accessibility features to assist screen readers, so you can add content into your HTML document to make it easier for screen readers to audibly announce the content of your document for people that have visual impairment. Also, something that's attracted quite a lot of attention, the ability to play audio and video natively in a web page without the need for plugins. So obviously that's quite appealing for the mobile market. We also have a rich graphics API. In fact, we have two different ways of doing graphics in HTML5. There's a canvas element, and there's something called scalable vector graphics. SVG has actually existed for some time outside of HTML, but it's now been adopted as part of the HTML family. So some more HTML5 features. Web storage and web SQL. This allows you to store data on your browser persistently, so that when you close the browser and then reopen it, you can get the data back again. It gives you an alternative to session state that you'd use server-side in a traditional web application. We also have something called web SQL, an SQL syntax which allows you to store data in a kind of database in your browser. Then we have the communication API, the ability to communicate from one part of a document to another part of the document that might have been downloaded from a different web server. Then we have geolocation. This is very useful for mobile devices to be able to find out where you are and then maybe display a map or tell the user how to get to the nearest coffee shop. Web workers, that's multi-threading. So a browser can now be multi-threaded. And WebSockets, a new way for a browser and a server to communicate. So a web browser can send information to the web server, and the web server can be sending information back continually to a web browser with latest stock tick prices, for example. So a very powerful way of communicating now between the browser and the server. And then offline working, the ability for a browser to grab content from a server while it's got a connection, And then when you're disconnected, you already have all the files you need, even if there's no network connection. Sitting alongside HTML5, we have another set of related standards, CSS3, Cascading Style Sheets 3. This provides some nice features too. Drop shadows, so you can have a div or an element with a shadow and rounded corners. Transformations, you can take any element, like a button or header, and rotate it, or scale it, or move it to a different location, and you can animate that as well. Additional selector features, if you're familiar with CSS, you'll know that you can use various different ways to find elements, and CSS3 has some new syntax for selection. Web fonts, a new way of managing fonts locally on your server. And then media queries, the ability to define adaptive applications where it displays itself differently on the screen than on the printer. So, tools for creating HTML5 and CSS3. You could use almost anything you want. So, for example, you could just use Notepad or Eclipse or Visual Studio. I use Komodo Edit a lot these days. It's a free tool. It supports HTML5 plus various other languages like JavaScript and Ruby and CSS. You can download it for free from this website. One thing that is important is that you test your applications on all the browsers that you need to support, because some browsers might support one feature, other browsers might not. So Internet Explorer version 9 has relatively good support for HTML5. Google Chrome has excellent support. Firefox, again, that's pretty good. And then Apple, Safari, and Opera, these are the browsers that I've installed on my desktop, and I test my HTML5 applications against all of these browsers. Another thing to be aware of course, is the version. It actually makes a big difference which version of the browser you're using. For example, Internet Explorer version 8 just doesn't support HTML5 at all. Version 9 is the first version that supports it. So you have to be very careful. Testing is the key point. So HTML5 is really exciting. There's so much new stuff in there. It really does transform the way we work in the web development arena.